welcome to another edition of News from the Block. I'm Mark Thompson, the director of the Adopt the Block Outreach Center, and I am so excited to be back again in the PAC 14 studios with a very special guest. But today, I want to take us back just a little bit. If you recall, I'm looking at 10 years ago, the city of Salisbury went to Tampa, Florida for the All-American City Award. And one of the projects that won the award and allowed the city of Salisbury to be All-American City was a small program called the Community Emergency Shelter Project, better known as CEF. But today, that has grown into something called the Hands and Hearts Ending Homelessness. And we have in the PAC 14 studios today, Pastor Greg Carlson. Welcome, Pastor.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be here.
Wow, I'm really excited. Now, you're the pastor of the Park Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yes, sir.
Why don't you tell our audience that may not be familiar with you, how did you come about being the pastor of that church?
Oh, wow. You want the short version? Or
the short version.
The short version,
yeah.
Okay. Well, I've been here 7 years. I've been in the ministry 17 years. In 2006, I sold my small business in Charleston, South Carolina, and entered ministry in Vermont, where I was for 5 years, and then 5 years in Maine. And 7 years ago, I came here to Salisbury as the pastor of the Park, and at the time, Seaford, Delaware, Seventh-day Adventist churches.
Well, I always like to let our audience know how people really got to Salisbury, and it shows a little bit about your heart for our city. So we're here to talk about, I called it the Community Emergency Shelter Project, what the name was, but the new name now for the homeless shelter for men during the winter months is called
Hands and Hearts Ending Homelessness.
How did they get that name?
You know, I wasn't at that meeting, but it comes out of the scripture, you know, being the hands of Jesus to help. You know, Matthew speaks about, you know, I was hungry and you fed me, I was naked and you clothed me, and so that philosophy is kind of the basis of the new name.
I see. And, you know, if for our viewing audience, if you remember and recall the shelter, again, 10 years ago, I think even before that, there was a social worker. She was in fact, she was actually the coordinator for the program at Salisbury University.
Yes.
Brenda Jordan.
That's what I understand.
That started this program. So when it started, why is it so important to have something like Hands and Hearts ending homelessness? Why is it important?
Well, my understanding, and obviously as we've already you know, figured out, I wasn't here. What I believe was around 20 years ago. Several men here in Salisbury actually froze to death one winter. And my understanding is, and I've already learned more than I knew from you about, you know, 10 years ago and winning this award for the city. That's awesome. That she, Brenda Jordan, and others there at SU got involved and recruited some of the churches and began to house the men, if I understand correctly, January through March at the time in different locations.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's been a lot of churches that helped in this project. So how did it come to land on your doorstep?
Well, that's a great question. You know, 3 years ago, COVID changed everything. And until about 3 or 4 years ago, Donna Clark at Hope had become the coordinator of this coalition of churches, if you will, that were housing the men, a week here, 2 weeks there, and they moved around from location to location. And Donna Clark had, you know, indicated that she needed to turn over that leadership to somebody else that was familiar with the organization, so that she could spend more time with her husband and developing what Hope does. And Walter Davidson, who's one of my church members, became the executive director at that time of CESP. And we had you know, he had a normal year. I went to the shelter one time that year with him over at, I believe it was at Bethany. You know, kind of my initial indoctrination into it, and it was like, was impressed but didn't really get involved right away. And then when COVID hit, for a winter and a half, most of 2 winters, he had the men housed at the Langler Memorial Building, which is part of Wacomico Presbyterian Church. And then after the second winter there, that location was no longer available. They had other things going on in there. And so Walter came to me. We have a community outreach building at our church. And he asked me, he said, what do you think about us using our building? And I said, well, you know, as anybody else, we got committees to go through, so we went to the board. And I didn't do a lot of lobbying prior to that board meeting or anything, but we got in the board. My board knew we would be discussing it. And Walter was there, and of course, we had prayed a lot. Didn't really know how it would come out. But it was a board meeting, and if you sat in board meetings, this doesn't happen often. You could sense the Holy Spirit in the room. And one of my board members finally spoke up and says, you know, and he was looking out the window, and you could see the building across the parking lot. And he says, it says Community Outreach Building right on the building. It was during COVID. We used it for youth events and our own fellowship dinners and so forth. But we weren't doing that during COVID. You know, all of it was shut down. And he says, you know, how can we call ourselves Christians and not use our community outreach building to outreach to the community?
You know, and that's what a lot of, and I'm really happy you brought that story up, and we talk a little bit more about it, and that's, you know, when I look at Hands and Hearts ending homelessness, the hands and hearts, the hearts were something. And let me just say this, you know, now your church is located, it's not in the city though, is it?
That's been a challenge, yes.
It's out by Holt Paper Company. How did the men get out there?
Yeah, we're just past the Purdue Stadium on the right. Everybody goes to Ocean City sooner or later, and I always tell people, yes, that looks around from the street and you got the pointy thing on it. I guess we call it steeples, but it's right there next to Holt Paper. It's on John Deere Drive next to the John Deere dealership, and I guess whoever's there first gets to name the street because our sister church is on Adventist Drive over on the other side of town.
Okay, I was wondering about that.
But I just, you know, I have no idea. But anyway, the transportation the first winter was a huge challenge. We spent a lot of money renting a van, moving the men back and forth from the bus station over here by City Hall. And we were renting the van, and it was costing me a good bit of money. And near the end of that winter, I had a guest speaker from over at Silver Springs who runs a large nonprofit over there that caters to the developmentally disabled. And he has a fleet of vehicles. So he was there that week, and he preached for our service, and afterwards he was interested in knowing about the shelter. So we walked over there, we're showing him through, and he's, you know, how's it going? You know, what's your victories, what's your challenges? And I said, well, transportation's eating us up. And he said, you know, we've been renting this 15-passenger van, and he said, I got a brand new one. I'm not using it. Come and get it. And so we went over and used it for the last month that we were open. And then again this year he allowed us to use it. We're leasing it from him, so to speak. And it was so brand new, Mark, that we did the first oil change on it that first winter. And so it was, you know, it was still a hassle, you know, getting the men back and forth. We would take 2 trips. We couldn't get them all in one. So we, you know, pick them up at 5 there at the bus stop and bring them to the shelter. And 7 o'clock in the morning, we'd take them back.
Wow, that's amazing. And again, you're watching News from the Block, Adopt the Block Outreach Center. And today our special guest in this PAC 14 studios is Pastor Greg Carlson of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And he's also heading up and working with a team of people for the Hands and Hearts Ending Homelessness, or better known as the homeless shelter for the men during the winter months. But let me do this. I was so impressed, and I want our audience to understand this. This is just the 22-23 year. Let me tell you exactly what this church has done.
Yeah, you got some statistics.
You've done 80 men were sheltered.
Yeah, different, unique men, you know, that came and went.
And these were homeless men that were out in the street.
Yeah, some for one night, some for multiple nights.
Wow.
You know, some the whole winter.
You had, it says that 2 men were moved into housing. So is that their own housing?
Yeah, and that's not we that did it, but we collaborate with the city. We collaborate with other housing organizations, you know, social workers, et cetera, that help to make this happen, including the folks at Hope.
Okay.
And our own operations director, Kathy Cannon, is phenomenal. She turns over rocks that the rest of us don't even know about.
Oh yeah, Kathy is.
And makes things happen.
Wow. And let the audience also know this is different from the Ann Street Village, where the Ann Street Village are men staying there. That's one separate program. This is the program that lasts how many weeks again?
Well, I understand back in previous years it was 3 months: January, February, March. This year we opened November 15. We closed April 15.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Continue with the stats. We showed 13 men went to rehab.
Yeah.
Because there's a drug addiction program,
Yes.
and
Yes.
we have a problem with that
Yeah.
with the homeless.
Yeah.
This is one that I really want to bring up. 3 men where you reunited with their families.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
to see
brother,
that.
or whatever it might be, but yeah, reconciliation going on there, So
Wow.
Yeah.
And again, by being in your shelter, one man was taken to Tidal Health for intake into Shepherd Pratt, and one man entered a long-term mental health facility. So
yeah,
again, mental health and drug addiction is some of the
It
causes.
It is.
So let's do this. Why don't you walk our audience through what happens when the men get to your church?
Okay, well, but just to bounce off what you said about mental health and addictions, we are a low barrier shelter. We let men in, whatever their background is, and
So you don't turn anyone away.
don't turn anyone away. Our line in the sand, so to speak, is no drugs or alcohol, with you. But some of these men come in rather inebriated, and if they're not causing trouble, we don't put them out. We don't allow consumption on site, of course, but they most of the time are really good guys, So there's that aspect, but. When they arrive if they're a first time guest, there's an intake process, paperwork, et cetera, et cetera. It's based on first come, first serve. If we have bunks available, we have 32 cubicles, and we ran 35, 36 men this last winter. We put them in the aisle, put them in the back corner, whatever we could to, get them out of the cold.
Yeah, I like what you said about cubicles. I've seen it, and you have like these partitions, fiberglass or plexiglass. Or...
No, it's not quite that high tech.
Oh.
It's clear shower curtains.
Really?
Yeah. So when again, COVID changed everything, right? Our whole world changed with COVID, and so when we were at the Langler Memorial Building, space dictated how many men we could put in. And so Walter designed in his mind, and then made it happen, a framework out of PVC pipe, and then we hung clear shower curtains on there with zip ties to prevent barrier as far as germs and so forth is concerned. But it really has been a hit with the guys. For one thing, it used to be a cot and a chair and a cot and a chair and a cot and a chair.
That's what I remember.
Now there's a cot and a chair and about an extra foot of space, and it's given them their own little, this is my spot. Everybody needs a spot, right? And in fact, we've observed, guys will go down and talk to his buddy, and then he'll say, well, I'm gonna go back to my house. I'm gonna go back to my place. I'm gonna go, or hey man, get out of my bunk. Go away. This is my spot. And so it's given them a sense of permanence. And the guys also liked the idea of being in the same place all year. They used to lose a lot of stuff. On the weekend they moved from this church to that church, and transportation and so forth. So they like being able to stay in one place the whole time.
Wow, and that is amazing, because I remember when the Seth program was there, every week they moved, and
week or two, depending upon the church.
Wow, that's now something else. So they're there, and I was there one week.
Yeah,
and,
you popped in. Yeah.
I popped in, and man, it smelled good in there. So tell us about what do you feed? How do you get the food for this?
Almost 98% of the food is volunteer donations. Different churches. This last year we focused really on trying to encourage different churches to take a whole week. Or some churches took 2 weeks, and they provided the meals, they provided the supervision at the desk, the whole thing. But most of the food arrives sometime between 5 and 6 already prepared. You know, restaurants have brought food, churches have brought food, individuals have brought food. We got one lady that loved to bring pies, and I love to eat pies, and she discovered I like blueberry pie, so often the pastor got his own blueberry pie. You know, hey,
pastor has privileges.
You know, it's fruit, it's health food, right? But so yeah, a lot of different organizations, you know, supported us with donations of food, and then we had a staff in the kitchen that was usually our people that would, you know, serve it and so forth. But sometimes they come in and do the whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they get to feed, they get to eat. Did you have any other activities or anything else you did while they were there for that until they left the next morning?
Well, you know, there's TV, of course. You know, guys sit around and play cards. This year we put out a microwave. They like to come in and make their own oodles and whatever, and that was a challenge. It was a mess a lot of times, but hey, you know, you know, puzzles to put together. But you know, most of these guys, you know, you've been on the street all day. You know, you get your belly full, you're ready to lay down and relax. But yeah, a lot of them would sit around and visit and carry on, and we get to know them, have a chance to visit with them, and just socialize.
Well, that's amazing. Again, you're watching News from the Block, and our guest today is the pastor, Greg Carlson. You mentioned that you're a low barrier shelter. Mm-hmm. And can you explain what that means? And then also, that means you accept anybody?
You know, well, we're men only, obviously,
Men only.
But yeah, I mean, if you're a man and you're in need and we got a bunk, you know, sex offenders, we don't put them out, you know, and again, unless they're bringing drugs and alcohol on the campus, you know.
That's amazing. You know, sometimes when I hear on the blocks different things, they say, well, don't get those men, they're dangerous, they might do something to you. Did you find any issues when they were staying with you?
You know, there's always potential. You know, we're human. We're all sinners, and you know, anger flares and tempers and so forth. But you know, one thing that's interesting is these guys all know each other, and if one of them starts to act up, 2 or 3 of them are going to jump in the way and you know, tell him to chill out. You know, and you know, there was a point one night this last year where somebody got a little bit bowed up towards Kathy, and 2 or 3 guys just jumped in there and said, "No, you're not messing with Mom."
Yeah.
You know, they call her Mom. You're not messing with Mom, and so you know she's not scared. But you know we got you know, the police know where we're at. If we need them, they're right there and support us and so forth.
You know, and I tell people, and I think that's so important. When you have a sense of love, it breaks down any barriers.
Yeah.
And again, hands and hearts, ending homelessness. So when people, and I like when you said they're like a family, a brotherhood of these men on the street. So they come in.
I mean, that can be good, it can be bad too. If they have a problem on the street during the day, sometimes they bring it in. But yeah, I mean, but for the grace of God, there go I, right?
That's it.
You know, a whole lot of us are just a few paychecks from being in the same situation.
Yeah, and that's what we try to tell people. It's just try it. We are our brother's keeper. Let me ask you speaking about that, volunteers. How do you solicit volunteers for this program?
Well, you know, Facebook, networking.
So on Facebook, you mentioned, what do they go on to see this on Facebook?
Well, our Facebook website, I think you're going to flash that on the screen, and our website. There's a sign up genius on there on the website. The Facebook is more about, you know, posting events and we do a lot on there to thank different organizations for bringing dinner. We'll have a picture of the dinner and so forth. But on the website, there's a sign up genius on there, and you can see which shifts are needed and which meals are needed. A lot of people will just bring instead of meals, they'll supply the snacks, because you know, besides giving them dinner every night and breakfast every morning, they leave there with a bag lunch.
Oh, okay.
And so you know, it's 3 meals a day that these guys are getting, besides a place to stay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I think it's shut down in March. Close it for April.
Yeah.
So what do you see as a vision? What can people do, or can they do anything now if they want to help you?
Well, Yeah, I mean, money is always good, right? We are, as a new nonprofit, it transitioned from over the last probably 2 years ago, maybe now, from CESP to HHEH. And that's when we received our own nonprofit status, applied for and so forth, and formed the board, which I chair the board. That's really my official role with this organization as the chair of the board. It's a separate entity from the Park Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Okay, that's good to know.
We're currently just housing it there. And it's important to me that the public realizes that I don't look at this as an Adventist ministry as much as an opportunity for the Adventists to be involved in the community and in this ministry. And so, I think in our visiting the other day, Mark, off the record, I mentioned that last year I went to a convention in Kentucky for the entire North American Division of Seventh-day Adventist pastors, about 10,000 pastors there. And one of our speakers every night got up, a guy by the name of George Knight, is he's in his 80s now, retired professor of Adventist history and theology, or I don't remember his whole title. But he did a piece every night that was, we're building on the shoulders of those who went before. And he would then highlight an early Adventist pioneer from 100 years ago. And most of the time, and this was in a time where we were very forward thinking, and that these pioneers that he would highlight were women and blacks. And so I got, I thought, what, that's the same thing we're doing with this shelter. This isn't me. I didn't invent this. I just am blessed to be the one that's involved now, and we're trying to take it to the next logical step. And so we are, I want to acknowledge all those churches and organizations that's been a part of it for years and years, long before I came along. But we're now beginning to visit with some of the other organizations in town who work with the same population. We want to grow to year-round operations, to continue the cold weather aspect, the emergency shelter aspect in one part of our facility. But we're looking for a permanent facility somewhere in town. Okay. And the transportation that we spoke about is a real struggle. And so we want to find a location in town where we can be open 24/7 and expand into helping those that are recently became homeless, and try to help them get back on their feet and back into housing, find jobs. We want to work with men getting out of prison, don't have anywhere to go. Help them get established, save up some money, find a job, and get that first apartment, get back on their feet, and be part of society. Some people need a place before and after hospital care, and so we want to possibly work with that. But all of that is dependent on other organizations coming and being a part of this. We don't. One of my philosophies is that the key to success is to surround yourself with people who know what they're doing. So we don't have to do everything, but if we can provide the place for the men and then bring in services from here and there, addiction services, social services, housing services, and have a place where these other organizations can come and work under this roof and meet the men.
And again, you're watching, if you just came in, I'm Mark Thompson, Director of the Adopt the Block Outreach. You're watching News from the Block. Our guest today is the Pastor Greg Carlson, and we're talking about hands and hearts helping to end homelessness.
HHEH.
I'm not going to say that because I get tied tongue. But what's interesting, and I'm just so grateful I met you, because what you're doing is, again, one of our missions at the Adopt the Block. We're not trying to create anything in what's already being done, but we have a facility, let people use it and partner. So, one thing before because I really want to talk to you about something else in a minute. So we talk about people, money, volunteers with a website. I know you're like the director of the board. Yeah. If somebody wants to be a member of the board, do they send you a resume, or how would they contact
you?
Absolutely.
And I guess we can put my email address out there on the screen for people. But we're currently building the board. We have a board that consists of 5 people currently. Myself, I have a member from Patty Mannion from Wacomico Presbyterian, Sharon DeShield from Asbury, Carolee Greenwood is see, I shouldn't start naming names. Christ United Methodist.
Okay.
Andra Roberts from St. James, AME, and then of course, Walter is director. He's not a board member. Goes to my church, and Kathy Cannon, our operations director, and she's, by the way, continued to do street outreach this summer. Still feeding. We're still feeding men over the summer. She's from Community of Joy, Martin Hutchinson's church.
And so we'll have all this on our screen. But before I go, I want to give Pastor Carlson, really intriguing. I love your tie, but I want you to tell us and leave this with our audience, something about that life-changing trip you did and what you have on the table.
Oh, man.
We have a couple minutes, so let's...
2 minutes. Okay. Oh, boy, you're asking a lot from a preacher. On March 9, I flew to Cairo, Egypt. Arrived March 10. It's a long flight, especially in the middle seat. And then we transferred and flew to Luxor, Egypt, where the Valley of the Kings is located. I was in King Tut's tomb and stood as close as me to you and saw King Tut laying there, and he hadn't moved in however many thousand years it is. And so we were over there 3 weeks in Egypt, Jordan, and Israel. And now when I read the New Testament, I'm like, yeah, I went there. I went to Capernaum and Bethesda and Nazareth and Jericho and Bethlehem and I mean, from north to south, to Caesarea by the sea to Caesarea Philippi, and it was life changing. And Jerusalem's fascinating. Cairo is insane. The traffic just is honk the horns and drive and people walking across, but no wrecks and traffic moves. But Old Jerusalem, we were there the opening Friday night of Ramadan and got in a crowd of about 200,000 Muslims that was just like packed. Just you move when the crowd moved. Never any fear of danger. At the Western Wall, a lot of bar mitzvahs going on down there, and boy, they were partying, having a good time.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about
one of the places we maybe we should make this a quiz, but one of the places we visited was the Valley of Elah. And so I have 5 smooth stones here. I guess the camera can pick that up. The Valley of Elah is the famous site of the David and Goliath battle.
And those are rocks
those are from the stream in the Valley of Elah. And I brought back quite a bit of material, organic material. The pottery shards are everywhere over there, broken pottery. And I brought back those kind of souvenirs. And I have a sling here that I did the children's story the other day. This is a sling my brother made for me years and years ago. So I threw a stone in the Valley of Elah, and I'm not near as good as David, so Goliath would still be alive if it was up to me.
Well, I'm sure happy he fell.
Yeah.
But again, I'm so grateful to have met you and the mission, the work that you're doing, the service for our community. Again, my name is Mark Thompson, Director of the Adopt the Block Outreach Center, 818 Benny Street, coming very soon. Yeah. And you have just witnessed and been part of News from the Block. We're here with Pastor Greg Carlson from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the director of the, let me say it again, Hands and Hearts Ending Homelessness.
Very good.
And again, we'll have all the information for you at the bottom of the screen and also at the end of this conclusion. But once again, we want to thank PAC 14 for allowing us to come into their studio to provide much needed information to our community. Once again, as I say, my name is Mark Thompson and we love you. And are we our brother's keeper?
Absolutely.
Yes, we are.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time.